And welcome to the Harrison Bridge Show. Today we are discussing a very current industry topic, how utilities can drive operational improvement using data and AI. Joining us is an expert on this subject, Steve Roberts. Steve has over 20 years experience in energy and tech. He is currently the utility lead for Palantir, who build world-class software for data analytics and data-driven decision making. Steve, it's a pleasure to have you with us.
Thanks, Lee. Great to be here. Looking forward to it.
Likewise, and I'm also joined by Kirsty Ames, who's emceeing the show and handling any questions from viewers. Hi, Kirsty.
Hi, Lee. How you doing?
I'm good, thanks very much. Looking forward to this one.
I am indeed. And just to let everybody know, please come and talk to me in the comments. We've already had our first comment from Helen, who's saying that the AI element is something she's really interested in. So please come over there, and anything that you've got, I'll bring up to Lee and Steve as we go through.
Thank you, Kirsty. So, Steve, in researching for this show, a lot of utility execs that I spoke to said that they're still struggling with how to make best use of their data. And some of them, quite frankly, are embarrassed around what their organization is doing. So why is it so difficult, and how can technology bridge the gap?
Well, if you think about the utility industry in the UK and elsewhere in the world, the companies have been around in one form or another, sometimes for over 100 years. And since the Second World War in the 50s and 60s, when today's energy networks were built out, things for many decades didn't really change. It was a largely static system. You had a few generators, the network, demand and supply were relatively well understood. It's only recently, really, with the energy transition, the requirements of net zero, that has kind of been turned on its head. And it means that the energy networks have got to go away from being largely passive to being much more active and dynamic. And a lot of that is around the use of data and digitalization. So you can imagine that for those businesses that have been doing the same thing for many, many decades, there are big challenges around trying to deal with that. Firstly, obviously, there's a skills challenge. So they've got a lot of great engineering people, but not necessarily a lot of people who understand data and digitalization. So that's one problem. And by their nature, because they're running critical national infrastructure, these organizations take a pretty conservative approach to change. And that, by and large, that is the right thing to do, because obviously, we don't want to break stuff. So the ideas of moving into a kind of world of technology where we kind of go fast and break things is pretty difficult for a lot of these organizations to cope with. And so you've got this combination of lack of skills, you've got this kind of cultural barriers to change, which are quite difficult to overcome. So that it's not a technology problem, I don't think. It's really often more about operating models and how do you change the way that the business runs in order to be able to take advantage of this technology. So that's kind of where we see the big problems.
Thanks, Steve. So very old energy system, skill problems with the challenge of learning data and digital, and then that contrasting with, perhaps a very conservative approach. And also, I find people inherently don't like change, do they? Is that also part of the problem, Steve?
Yeah, of course. I mean, a lot of the organisations we work with, whether it be utilities, also we see the same kind of things in healthcare. They're used to the way that they do things. They've had processes in place. They've been doing it on bits of paper for 20 years. Why should I do it differently now? Even if you show them something that looks amazing, that looks amazing, but then they just go back to doing it the way that they've always been doing it. I mean, there's an aging workforce problem as well, I think, within the utility sector, which may be part of that problem. Maybe the younger generation coming in are more adept, more used to these kind of technologies. But so I think it's that kind of resistance to change. Why would we do things differently than the way we've always done them? That is one of the problems.
Mm. And do you still have perhaps that 60-year-old engineer with a trainee power engineer behind them observing what they're doing, which is actually really unnecessary because that could be systemized into a process using?
I think there are elements of that. I'm hoping that some of that stuff has gone away. I mean, I think I have heard that where people learn by standing behind the guy who does it today and seeing how it works, and that some of the things aren't really systemized. A lot of information sits in people's heads, so that is a challenge. How do you take stuff out of people's heads? How do you build new systems? If you've got junior staff coming in, it can be really difficult for them to operate at the same level as the people who've been doing it for 20 years. So there's that kind of challenge as well. And this is where digital technology and AI particularly, I think, can help bridge that gap and make the the more junior staff be almost as capable and expert as the more experienced staff by giving them access to the right data. That's one of the things that one of the big advantages with this kind of new approaches to data and digitalization.
Yeah. And it can really accelerate the learning, can't it, for those more junior engineers? So where should utilities start when embarking on their digital journey?
Well, our recommendation is start small, but start real, I think. So what I mean by start small, don't try and boil the ocean, don't try and immediately embark on a 5-year digital transformation journey. You need to pick a real business problem that is causing you issues today, and start to address that. Don't over focus on innovation. I think that is one of the other challenges that we see in the utility sector. There's a thing that said, well, we're going to do this innovation project, that's data and digitalization, and there's a risk that innovation projects just get stuck in that kind of innovation silo and they never really get into production, never actually addressing the real issues the business is facing. So innovation has its place, but what you want to really do is focus on an actual project, something that is a real operational challenge that's bugging you today. And there are likely to be plenty of those around in most organizations that can be identified. So it's start relatively small, but then make it real. And if you start to make it real, then you'll start to build confidence in the staff who we said are resistant to change. But if they see it actually working for them, affecting their daily jobs and making their lives easier, then that's how you start to build this kind of change in attitude and changing the way that people adopt the technology, and then that sort of leads to process change and all the other good things that you're trying to achieve in making the organization run more effectively.
Brilliant. So be wary of radical innovation is what I'm hearing. Start small, but focus on something practical that results in actual business benefits. Would you also perhaps do an audit first to identify key pain points and then kind of test and learn?
Yeah, I think most people already know where the problems are in their operation. I mean, you can just simply ask people. I think that is, we often, as Palantir, we're often brought in where there's some kind of crisis situation going on. So there may be something that is a burning issue that is keeping the CEO awake at night. That often is the kind of catalyst to let's try and do something. We really start to recognize that there's something wrong here, and that kind of management buy-in at that kind of stage can be helpful in sort of helping to get traction and to move some of the barriers out of the way that sometimes prevent this kind of progress. So so an audit, maybe that sounds as long as it doesn't take too long. That would be
Sure.
be my caution on that. So.
And you mentioned don't boil the ocean, because we've all seen those big IT projects go completely wrong. So start small. Okay.
Yeah, I think that I think by and large people have kind of moved away from the the 5-year big bang type IT projects because they've not had a great track record of delivery. Largely, people are trying to look at I hesitate to use the word agile, but people want to act in a more agile way. So it's taking smaller problems, dealing with them, and then moving on to the next one. That kind of approach it can be more effective. You don't need to change everything all at once. You can start and do things gradually and kind of build up and gradually transform the organization.
Really insightful. Kirsty, do we have any questions before I move on?
We haven't had questions, but we've had some great comments. David is very much enjoying himself. He says that this is awesome, which is always lovely to hear, David. Thank you. And Adam said, I think something that many people are probably thinking whilst watching this is that this is relevant to so many businesses right now. So I think it's really helpful. So thank you so much for your comments so far, guys. If you have any more, come and talk to me. If not, if you've got any questions for Lee or Steve, then feel free to pop them in as well.
Thank you, Kirsty. So, Steve, if you were to give our viewers 3 practical tips for a digital and data transition, what would they be?
Well, the first thing is to try and identify the right use case, the right place to start. I mentioned about starting small, but where is it that you're going to start? So I talk to people in operational level in utilities all the time, and they'll be very quick mostly to tell you about, wouldn't it be great if I didn't have to log into those 3 systems in order to do this kind of simple routine task? Or why is it that I have to go and download this CSV file from this SCADA system, put it into an Excel spreadsheet? manipulate it, send it over to somebody else. You know, all those kind of barriers that are, we're working with technology every day, but there's often it's not as easy as it could be. So it's trying to identify those kind of areas that could be done better. So, but what you really want with a use case is the ability to have something that we say is like two-way. So again, it's tempting with data and digitalization when you start going to do something. Oh, well, let's build a dashboard. You see a lot of people do. We'll build a dashboard and that'll show it looks pretty, and management like it. But a dashboard is only kind of a one-way process. So you're doing analytics, you're presenting information in a nice way that people can understand. But then what happens next? It's kind of one way. What we think is really important is that you then make that as a basis for action. So you have the analytics, you have the dashboard, but then the user is presented with a series of actions that they can take. So buttons literally that you can press on the screen and say, okay, well, this is the situation. I'm going to press a button and it's going to create some action in our systems. They're going to flow back down through that system and create some, a work order or whatever, a purchase order or whatever it might be within your system. So you get this two-way process going on, what we call a kind of workflow, end-to-end workflow, where you've got data coming out one way, user sees the data, is presented with some action choices, they take the action, and that action then goes and actually creates work in the real systems. And by doing that, not only are you, improving the efficiency of the operation, but you're also capturing the way those decisions are being made. So that is really good for us as an audit trail. So if senior management want to come back at some point later and go, well, why did we do that? What was the basis for that? You've got the whole record there of here's the data that was used, here's the decision that was taken. Often there are comments, that are attached to that by the people that did it. There'll be some kind of authorization process going on there. So you've got that whole process. So great for management, great for the regulator as well, if that becomes an issue. But the other fantastic thing about this is that you start to build up this kind of corpus of corporate knowledge, if you like, about how these decisions are being made at an operational level and why and what data was used and so on. And that, when you start to think about applying artificial intelligence, like these systems like ChatGPT, these so-called large language models, they can be looking at that history. So when the next time that situation arises in the business, the operational person is presented with the choices of, oh, last time this came up, we did this, and that seemed to be very effective. Or in previous situations, we've done one of these two things. Would you like me to initiate that process? Create the work order, create the purchase order, whatever it might be. You start to kind of semi-automate that process. And then ultimately, as this kind of technology develops and you build more confidence in it, you can start to fully automate some of those kind of more routine decisions. And that's where we're finding a lot of excitement around this area at the moment, in all kinds of areas that have traditionally been kind of manual processes, where people are sort of saying, well, wow, this is incredible, that we can really change.
Save so much time and resource. So to summarize there, it's to make the workflow information two-way, have a record, an audit trail, which helps you to build knowledge that things like ChatGPT can learn from. You can automate that, which makes you more efficient, in a nutshell.
Indeed. There's some stuff we're doing at the moment in the States with hospital operators, a company called HCA that operates like 185 hospitals. They've got 30,000 nurses. Just scheduling the nurses, the rostering of nurses on their shifts takes matrons, like half their working month is spent rostering. And they've done that largely with a kind of manual process, maybe a spreadsheet these days, but often bits of paper. And we've come in and helped some of these people build new systems that just apply simple business rules to that and a bit of AI. And they can do the whole process in a matter of minutes rather than it taking hours and weeks. You can apply that sort of thinking to the field force working with utilities. Energy companies got a lot of people out there doing stuff on the ground. You think of the same kind of approach, kind of optimizing the way these people are used, depending on their skill set, depending on their availability, all those kind of what shifts do they want to work, all that kind of stuff. So there's some very powerful things that can happen once you start to build all this together.
God, this is game-changing stuff. So tip number 2, Steve.
I've already sort of talked about this a bit, but it's about asking the business. It's about involving those people who are on the ground in what are the things that you would like to see run better. again, it's tempting to build these things as a kind of standalone technology type led application, but yeah, I don't think that necessarily is the right way to go. If you talk to the people who are on the ground who are seeing these real kind of problems day to day, and identify a short list of those things that can then build that first that use case, that operational use case with that workflow that we talked about. I remember a story about one of the electricity distribution operators who their CEO would tour around their depots, sort of different depot every month, and asking for feedback from the people who are actually doing stuff on the ground about what would make a difference to the way that you're working. And sometimes those things can be quite prosaic, but if you add them up across the whole organization, you can make real differences to the efficiency of the operation. It might not sound exciting in the annual report as a big digital innovation project, but it can be really making an actual difference to the way people work and really saving money, improving efficiency, all those kind of things. So yeah, I'd say work with those people that know what the problems are, and get their feedback. That would be my second tip.
And I guess if you're not engaging with your stakeholders, you could making a whole load of assumptions. Presumably that's where it goes wrong, if you're not asking your stakeholders around what the issues are and what could be improved, and you're going to miss out on a whole load of things, aren't you?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I've seen this several times with not just utilities, but other organisations where they built a fantastic new digital thing, and nobody uses it because they weren't really ever asked in the first place if they needed it or wanted it. But somebody decided it was what you needed if you were doing digital transformation. You needed one of these widgets, and it just sits there gathering dust, and you come back a year later and go, how's it going with the digital project? Oh, well, nobody's really used it. That's the trap you can fall into if you don't engage the users at the early part of the process. You get them involved in designing that workflow that I talked about. The way we operate, we have our kind of engineers who sit alongside the client's engineers, but also alongside the client's business users, the person who's ultimately going to be at the end of this. Is this the way you want it to look? Does it have the right information in it? Is this the right kind of timing for you? Is it is hourly good enough? Do you need it every 10 minutes? Or all those kind of questions that you can't really get through any of the means other than just sitting and working alongside the people who are going to be operating it. So I think that's a vital part of how you get these things to be successful, is through that kind of engagement and building something that looks like what they want to work with.
Okay, brilliant, thank you. And tip number 3 then, Steve.
So this one again is kind of part of Palantir's mantra, which is kind of get on with it. Really, be quick. Try and get something into production using real data in your live systems that actually does something that has impact. Don't leave it to one side. Don't run it in a sandbox with kind of notional data or some old data and say, isn't this good? Look at what we've done here. Get it into production. And that's the only way that you're really going to find out what are the actual barriers here. What things do we have to knock down? If we've got it, we've got to get the guys who are at the front of the organisation, on the ground. Got to get them enabled. So in order to do that, we've got to find out what their issues are. And maybe you might not get it right the first time. You can iterate these things. Do it, but do that quickly. So we aim to be building systems that get results within weeks, or certainly within a few months.
Really?
You shouldn't be expecting it to be a year or 2 years or 3 years for that kind of thing. And that way, you start to demonstrate success, and that's what the senior management.
You've then got proof, haven't you, which then can be shared amongst all your stakeholders.
As our CTO likes to say, don't show me a proof of concept, show me proof. That's what it's all about. So you can't, you can have something that's theoretical, but if it's actually doing real work on the ground, then and you'd be amazed what can be done in a very short period of time with the right kind of will. And you removing those barriers, which is where that kind of senior management kind of sponsorship is very helpful. And we often work in crisis situations in Palantir with our background in kind of intelligence and military. But one good example is what we did during COVID with the NHS, where the NHS came to us, so we need to be able to allocate ventilators to the different hospital trusts. There are 150 trusts. And they're all trying to order ventilators individually from the same suppliers, and of course complete chaos ensued. So NHS England wanted to build a system that would allow them to kind of centrally control that and make sure the right people had got those ventilators when they needed them. Because that being an emergency, that system had to be stood up within, I think we stood up in a couple of weeks, got that fully up and running, because it had to be. I mean, people said, oh, that's going to be impossible. There's no way you're ever going to be able to do that. You can't possibly connect to 150 different NHS trusts with all the different IT systems that they've got. It'll never work, but it did. You can do these things. It's surprising how easy it turns out to be when you actually, move the barriers out of the way. Another example we did when the Ukraine war happened. The government came to us and said, well, we're doing this program, Homes for Ukraine. We want to match up UK households who would like to host Ukrainian refugees with Ukrainian refugees. You've got to get it up and running quickly.
But I think.
Can you hear me?
I think there might have been a little bit of a problem with the Wi-Fi there. Lee, are you with us, Lee?
I think Lee's Wi-Fi, is it? Can you hear me okay, Kirsty?
I can hear you. Can you hear me, Steve?
Yeah, I can hear you fine. Yeah.
Well,
I am. Can you hear me?
We can hear you, but we can't see you, Lee. Oh, there you are. There you're back.
I'm back.
Well, just to give Lee a second to adjust, I do have a couple of questions for you.
Can you hear me?
That's okay, before we move on to the next one. So the first question is, are there any integrity risks to company systems by using new AI tools, extensions, plugins, etc.?
Short answer to that question is yes. There are indeed. If you're going to be using these kind of tools like large language models, ChatGPT, you need to be very careful about the way that you go about doing that. And that's one of the things where companies like Palantir have a large amount of expertise. It's about understanding how do you leverage this kind of technology without opening yourself to the risks either of copyright infringement or public data, private data being made accessible or being shared with systems where it shouldn't be shared. So that's because of our background. Again, we understand a lot about how to make sure only the right people see the data that they should be seeing. And so we can help work with you to build, use this kind of AI systems in ways that's both safe, ethical, protects people's privacy, all those kind of things. So those are real challenges, and the industry is working through those a lot at the moment. But yeah, I would be very cautious. I know a lot of organizations have already banned the use of the sort of standard versions of ChatGPT, which is probably the right thing to do. Yeah, you don't want to be.
Yeah. So we have had a couple of questions. So what I am going to do, I spoke to Steve. We like to finish as close to past as possible, but Steve has promised that he would stay until the end if we need to answer any more questions. But I think, Lee, your internet has sorted itself out. So do you want to carry on with our next question?
Yes, I hope you can hear me. So Steve's already given some great examples related to this, but how can digitizing your data impact the bottom line and improve operational efficiency?
Yeah, we've seen some truly transformational results coming out of this kind of work that we've been doing. One great example is one of the first commercial customers we started working with was BP in their oil and gas upstream operations. The CEO at the time, Bob Dudley, said BP stood for big problems. They were having a lot of operational difficulty, and costs were too high. Palantir came in and started to help them to integrate their data in a better way to enable them to operate things more efficiently. Like I said about doing things quickly, the first project we did with BP was done over the course of a weekend, and during almost a decade of working with them now, it's made a huge difference to the way they run things. So much so that their CFO, Murray Auchincloss, who's actually now the interim CEO, I think, for BP, he said at their last quarterly results that it was largely due to the work that they'd done with Palantir in integrating their data better that allowed them to reduce the so-called lift cost of oil, which is getting oil out of the ground, by 50%, which this is like billions of dollars of
50%.
It's a huge difference, and that's all about data. Similarly with Airbus, we did work with Airbus. Airbus had a challenge around supply chain with the building of the A350 aircraft, and a very complex situation, lots of different systems, thousands of suppliers, millions of parts. Again, by giving them better visibility, they were able to reduce the time it took to build an A350 by almost a third, which again was hundreds of millions of dollars of benefit. So if you get these things right, there are huge financial benefits, and there are business opportunities that come out of it as well. Potential to monetize some of the data, which people often talk about as an idea. But Airbus, for example, were able to do that off the back of this system that we built for them. They've monetized that by doing a day sharing platform with the airlines that allows them to kind of optimize the uptime of the Airbus aircraft. But there are examples across all kinds of different aspects of business. That's the thing. It's not, data and digitalization can apply to anything. We're working a lot in procurement departments, doing things like managing risk. We're applying AI to contract negotiations in the renewable energy sector. So you're doing complex PPAs, for example. You want to be able to know, okay, which part of the contract should I focus on? Which is the bit that we need to negotiate hard on, those kind of things. Or you're analyzing cost data, saying, they're telling me that there's been inflation price rises on this contract, but having analyzed it, we can see that maybe some of these are a bit higher than they should be. But those kind of things. Then in the customer area, there's a lot of work going on in this kind of so-called customer 360, which is very applicable to a lot of utility and energy supply type businesses. How do you improve the customer service experience? And again, it's about giving people who are providing service to your clients better access to systems, clearer next best action, all those kind of things. So there's just all kinds of different examples, and there's no area where AI is becoming very important. And I think our message would be don't just build a chatbot. Chatbots are marginal. I think as somebody who's been on the end of a chatbot, using one, I think we all have. They can get very frustrating quite quickly. What you want to do is you'd be better off investing in enabling your own people to better serve your customers rather than just putting money on a chatbot.
Ignore the latest thing. Yeah.
That's what we would say. But,
your BP case study, I mean, if a big corporate can make change happen in a weekend, so can anyone. So, the business case is a no-brainer to me, Steve. So if viewers want to reach out to you and Palantir, how should they do so?
Well, you can look me up on LinkedIn. I'm often in the debate on LinkedIn, so look me up. I'm happy to people to contact me and give our advice. We're ready and willing.
Okay, Lee. What we have is we've got a couple of questions left, but what I'm going to do is quickly, Lee, before we do the kind of summary in front of these last questions, should we quickly tell people what the next show is going to be?
Yeah, hopefully you can still hear me because my Wi-Fi is temperamental. So the next show is what execs need to know about LGBTQI+, which is on Wednesday, the 8th of November. We were having trouble before the show just saying that, and part of the problem is the language is evolving, so we need to stay current with that. So our guest speaker is Damien Dowling, who is an energy professional, and he's on the Pride and Energy Committee. So he'll be sharing his insights so that we can all, stay inclusive in the workplace.
Fantastic. That sounds like a great show. I'm looking forward to it. So, if I may, Steve, we've had a couple of comments, and I think I would be really interested. Some are statements, some are comments. I'd be really interested to see your point of view on them. So, Jonathan has asked, do you not need proof of concept in utilities, though? It's easy to show proof when it's a rotor or allocation, but when you're dealing with power and gas, it needs to be run in a sandbox. There's no point implementing a solution quickly if you aren't feeding in historic data that can provide insights. Even then, how do you implement it? Do you look at trends from historical data? And so on. So what's your response to this, Steve? It's quite a few questions in there.
Yeah, I mean, any project that we start with, I say it's vital to get it into a kind of production environment as quickly as you possibly can. But obviously, that doesn't mean that you throw the baby out with the bathwater and just do stuff that could be risky in any way. We tend to operate through either initially some kind of boot camp process where we'll work with the customer over a 3 to 5 day period, often working with a notional data or in a sandbox, as this was pointed out, to sort of test out that's the kind of proof of concept stage, I suppose. Then we would tend to follow that with a kind of 8 to 12 week kind of pilot project, and generally the pilot project is where you're starting to work with live data in the client's actual systems. I mean, that's one of the big barriers that is, it's all very well being able to build this thing as an innovation project, but unless you can overcome some of the challenges around how do we connect to the live data, that can be a really big problem in a CNI type environment. How do we make sure we're dealing with all of the privacy concerns, cyber security concerns, all those kind of things. So it's solving those problems is what I mean by making it real and making it production. So how would we get it into production? So the pilot projects tend to sort of tease out all those kind of issues that might prevent us from getting the real benefit. So yeah, it's focusing on the productionizing of it as being the end goal. It's kind of what I mean. Obviously, kind of stylized it a bit by just get it going. But yeah, we obviously have to be cautious and careful and getting over those kind of challenges. But they're all fixable. That's the thing. And there's it depends on whatever the use case is. There's all kinds of different ways of using. I mean, the simplest way to start off with is with that just kind of presenting data and making decisions. But if you've got access to historical data, then that's great. You can build what we call simple business rules. So that's just like, if this happens, and this happens, do this. So that's the kind of simple flow. But then as you get more sophisticated, you can start to build machine learning models, and you start to kind of leverage artificial intelligence to make that more powerful. So I think, again, start relatively simple. Start with tackling the kind of practical problems of getting access to the right data. Then start to think about business rules, then start to think about ML, and start to think about large language models and fancy AI further down the line. But you can't start without the foundations.
Fantastic. Okay, thank you for that, Steve. And we've had another question here, which this person's interested to see: how often do you fall foul of permissible use of data?
Well, this is I mentioned a bit about where Palantir came from. We started off 20 years ago dealing with a very specific use case around counterterrorism, working for what the Americans like to call the clandestine services. So we are extraordinarily aware of the sensitivity of data and making sure that data is used in the right way. We have I think it's unique in companies I've worked with, we have an ethics department and a privacy and civil liberties department. So I can call up a PhD philosopher if I need to and talk about whether this data should be shared and what way should it be shared. Is this is this ethical? Is this decent? Is it legal? All those kind of things. I mean, that is absolutely fundamentally kind of core to what we do every day. Is how do we do that? But I think on the other side, we have to not worry overly about that. There's a challenge in the utility sector where people say, well, we can't do it because of GDPR. They're just going to block, everything gets blocked. There's so many benefits that we can get in the energy system if there's better data sharing. And that's about overcoming some of those technical barriers. And we think they're all fixable. We're doing a lot of work with the NHS, and that is an example of the most sensitive kind of information about people and their health records and so on. So we've actually built technology into the product to deal with some of that, things called purpose-based access and so on, which really control who can see the data, and if they got, not only have they got the right role, but have they got a reason. So there's all kinds of things you can do from a technology standpoint to be able to use the data, but use it in a way that doesn't impact on people's privacy or that don't want it to be used.
Okay, fine, fantastic. And then the last question I've got for you today, Steve, quickly before we have overrun, but I just wanted to make sure these questions got answered. Somebody's made more of a statement. Having worked delivering a massive transformation, the gas CDSP, I don't necessarily recognize some of the issues around skills. Most of the big six in energy are also heavily outsourced with tech MSPs. The primary issue is the age of some of the underlying tech and historical tech architectures and processes that have made it difficult to extract data and drive insight. Equally, industry processes are also problematic. What's your opinion on that one, Steve?
Yeah, I mean, this is a common problem across a lot of organizations. So across the utilities, healthcare, I mentioned the NHS, they have that problem in spades. US Department of Defense has probably got the most complicated legacy IT environment anywhere in the world. Our MD would say, we fix those problems, we can fix these problems. I think we built a Swiss Army knife toolkit of ways of getting data out of every kind of legacy system known to man. There isn't anything probably that our engineers have not seen somewhere around the world in the last 20 years. And that's kind of part of the value of the kind of work that we do, is we know how to do these things. Well, give us the most difficult problem, we'll come and fix it. We'd like to run towards the fire, as somebody said. It's like, you might think it's difficult, you might have been told it's not going to be possible, you might not get data out of this whole system. That's what we do. So there are ways. Trust me.
Okay, fantastic. Thank you so much, Steve. So it's been a really great show. Thank you so much so far. But Lee, do you want to give us a quick summary before we come to Steve to find our top tip to how utilities can drive operational improvement using data and AI?
so many learns from this. So I think start small was the advice. Test and learn. Get the right user case, and making sure that the information flow is two-way. Speak to your people before you do anything, and focus on getting results quickly. I think were the key learns from my perspective.
Yes. I agree. Sorry,
So
there's a loud noise outside my window. So that's I very much agree with you there, Lee. So Steve, if somebody's watching this and they're thinking, you know, as Lee mentioned, you've covered a lot today, you've been really knowledgeable. Someone who wants to start driving improvement, what's the first thing that they should either consider or do?
Other than getting in touch with me, obviously, and our capabilities. And I touched on this at various points during the talk. I think it's about getting the right engagement from the business. So data and digitalization can be seen as a technology-led thing. There is a risk that the technology tail is wagging the business dog. You want to get senior level business sponsorship for these kind of programs. Somebody who's operationally experienced and knows the way that the business works. Get them behind your data and digitalization projects. Get them behind the pilot projects. We find it's very useful when we do one of these kind of small scale boot camps or these short pilots, is that you play that back to senior exec team, and they can go, we need to do more of this, or no, it's all right, but we don't. Maybe it's not the right time. But without that kind of level of exec sponsorship, you probably won't get as far as you'd like to, because it all costs money, doesn't it? I mean, all these things cost money, and you need someone to say, I'm going to foot the bill for doing this, which is always a challenge, right?
Fantastic. Yeah. Thank you so much, Steve. Lee, do you want to round up and take us home?
Yeah, thank you, Kirsty. Steve, this has been absolutely super interesting. I could listen to you for hours on this topic. So thank you for joining us. Kirsty, thank you for emceeing, and thanks to our viewers. We look forward to seeing you next time.